Um, Governments in affected countries will have to deal with both immediate and long-term challenges. And I would say that right now the most pressing challenge it is to avoid political violence and social violence and to create public trust. Because we know that there are more than 1 million people living in quarantine regions, and these people already need food and water relief and other emergency assistance. And governments need to create adequate responses for these populations, and also to create effective communication policies. And here, not only political authorities, but also religious authorities and community leaders, they can play a crucial role because it is important to share information about the disease and to explain that this kind of measures, the quarantine, the curfews, they are needed to protect the population and that they're not something against the population. So I think that this is very important to avoid the creation of islands of widespread panic and violence, which would have long-term serious effects, both political and economic. At the same time, the government will have to closely monitor the effects of this outbreak on the markets and to detect price spikes and try to minimize the effects of transport and trade disruptions. And another critical issue is isolation, because these countries they had a lot of regional trade and internal trade, and now this is affecting traditional trade routes, and so it is very important, for example, that ports do not close. Because these countries depend on food and fuel imports, and they will probably depend even more in the next month. And if ports close, for example, this would have serious consequences, serious economic consequences in the future. And another thing that governments would have to do or should do is try to keep close communication channels with companies and investors that were operating or that are still operating in the country, and share information with them and try to reassure them and show them that they're trying to effectively deal with this crisis. Because foreign investors and foreign companies and expects communities can play a crucial role when it comes to rebuild the country after this outbreak, to rebuild these countries. And finally, in the long term, these governments will have to not only to conquer back investors and companies, but also to demystify again the idea of Africa as a lost and a dangerous place. Because unfortunately, one of the effects of this Ebola outbreak is that the optimism about Africa and the story of a continent on the rise is being seriously affected. And so these governments, not only the ones affected by this outbreak, but also other African governments, will have to make additional efforts to attract back investors and foreign companies.